Chicago saw one of its most violent weekends of the year with more than 60 people shot over the weekend, a third of them under the age of 17.
Chicago faces an epidemic of gun violence. This year alone, more than 2,100 people have been shot, more than 400 killed.
We're going to take you now to Chicago, where this past weekend at least 52 people were shot, 8 of them killed in a wave of violence across the city.
13. With that shit, you get that.
And there's a lot of ways to get clout, mistaken identity, anything. You ain't gotta do with this shit. There's innocent bystanders getting killed in this shit every day, man. That's why you gotta keep it strapped.
You gotta keep something.
I like to keep some big shit in case a nigga try me, I'ma cook his ass.
Call Shaq Boy at the back, blowing these bobber niggas like Osama.
Cray, my young nigga.
K.I. my young killer. A lot of niggas be rapping, but we the ones tote guns, nigga.
These EBT ass niggas right here, man.
I'm from STL, but I be posted on EDT, bitch.
Boy, took a bill, we shoot that kill, boy, this shit super real. Bell out on them with that Draco and watch sure this shit spill.
She got super mad when I said I'm from 63rd, bitch.
Say loss.
Jakira Barnes, aka K.I., was born on January 21st, 1997, in Chicago, Illinois, to her mother, Chantel Brown. Before she would even turn 1 year old, she would lose her father. He was shot in the head with an AK-47 in front of his home. Some people say it's because he was a gang leader in the city of Chicago, but K.I.'s mom said that that's not true. K.I. would witness one of her brothers being murdered in front of her when she was very young, and death would become a common theme in her life. She also had a brother by the name of George Barnes, aka G.I. Joe, and they were very close. Growing up, K.I. seemed to be a normal girl. She enjoyed hanging out with her friends. She had boyfriends, and she was an honor roll student. She had dreams of becoming a social worker and helping out less fortunate kids. She attended Perspectives, IIT, Math and Science Academy. But in the middle of her 9th grade year, there was a change in K.I. Her grades were slipping, she was having behavioral issues at school, and she was spending a lot more time on the block. STL EBT, 63rd, with its most prominent member being Carlton Weekly, aka FBG Duck. K.I. wasn't a shooter at this time, but she would fight girls from rival neighborhoods like TYMB and their biggest rivals, who were basically right across the street at Parkway Gardens, Wick City. But what started as small neighborhood beefs and schoolyard fights were escalating into gunplay, and K.I. would start to lose more and more of her friends. Because on September 22nd, 2010, a 20-year-old man by the name of Jeremy Marshall, aka Lil Fo, was shot to death in the Woodlawn neighborhood. He was the cousin of FBG Kells, a well-respected member of STL EBT. It's said that the killer of Little Fo was Wick City member O.D. Perry, who was growing a reputation in the streets for being a shooter. And just a few months later, on January 12, 2011, K.I. would lose somebody who she was very close to, somebody who she grew up with, Shondell Gregory, aka Tuka.
STL crazy.
You already know.
See, I got the loud right here. You know, it's almost gone, but I don't give a fuck. Because I'm going to flame up another one.
Tuka was a beloved member of STL EBT. It's said as he sat at a bus stop, a car with 3 men pulled up on him, 2 from TYMB and 1 from Wick City, O.D. Perry. According to witnesses, one of the men exited the vehicle with a half mask over his face. He exchanged a few words with Tuka. Then a large caliber silver revolver was shown, and Tuka was shot in the chest. He stumbled away and fell on the ground. Then the gunman stood over him and fired 3 more shots into his body before getting back in the vehicle and speeding away. And it said that the shooter was O.D. Perry. The members of STL EBT would rename their gang to Tukaville as a way to pay honor to their fallen friend, and they would also say that they were smoking on Tuka, just like the Outlaws did for the late great Tupac Shakur, as a way to pay respect. But the opposition of Tukaville would quickly transform this from an act of endearment into an act of disrespect. When rising Chicago rapper Chief Keef got a hold of the term, he would often rap about how he was smoking on Tuka as a way to taunt their rivals from STL EBT. But it wasn't just in songs or just in the streets where the dead were being disrespected. Social media would become a battleground for different gangs, going back and forth, making death threats, and disrespecting each other's dead homies, increasing the violence in the city. The death of Tuka turned K.I.'s heart completely black, and she wanted nothing but revenge. She would be taken under the wing of older STL member C-Ball, who was also close to Tuka, and her cousin, Boss Trail, aka the Chicago Max Payne. It's said that he would teach the younger members of Tukaville about gunplay, how to handle their weapons, and how to kill. On August 10th, 2011, it was a celebration on STL EBT. It was Shondell Gregory's birthday. It was Tuka Day. FBG Duck will be filming his music video for his song Freestyle, and the whole Tukaville family would be there. And after filming the video, their adrenaline was pumping, and they felt like Tuka's birthday would be the perfect day for some get back. At 11:30 p.m., O.D. Perry would be walking near Parkway Gardens when he was ambushed and shot multiple times, including a shot to the neck, losing his life at 20 years old. The members of Wick City would mourn the loss of O.D. Perry, and they would rename the block in his honor. But they would also wonder who exactly was behind his death. Many people were saying that it was top Tukaville shooter Marvell Williams, aka FBG Wooski. But thanks to a witness tip, the Chicago PD would already have its primary suspects, Jakira K.I. Barnes and her street mentor, Rodney Stewart, aka Boss Trail. But many people didn't want to believe that a 14-year-old girl had taken the life of a respected Wick City member. O.D. Perry was known to carry a .357 Magnum, a gun he could be seen with in multiple pictures. But it said after shooting O.D., K.I. took that gun from him, and she could be seen on social media, posing with it as if it were a trophy. But by taking the life of O.D. Perry, K.I. would inadvertently create what would go on to become the most famous block in America, and they would call it O Block.
Outside, pop out. O Block, bring them glocks out. 300, bring them shots out. We shoot on your block now.
Dirt slime. You gotta know I go too far. Get two O's up on this honey. One of them might stand for O Block.
K.I. started to get the reputation of a shooter around the city, and her profile would rise even more when fellow Tukaville member King Little J, who was a very popular rapper during the rise of the Chicago drill era, and he was featured multiple times on the popular DJ Academic series War in Chirac. He would mention her in songs, rapping about how she was a shooter and how she was putting the murder game down in the streets. Some members of Tukaville called K.I. Little Snoop, as in Felicia Snoop Pearson, from the HBO television series The Wire. Her demeanor, her toughness, and how deadly she was reminded her gang of the character from the classic TV show.
Are you contracting or just doing some work around the house?
No, we work all over.
Full time?
No, we had about 5 jobs last month. Man, shit, I seen a tiny ass 22 round nose drop a nigga plenty of days, man. Motherfuckers get up, man, you like a pinball, rip your ass up. Big joints, though, big joints, man, just break a bone, just say fuck it.
K.I. was now in the trenches of the Chicago gang wars being supplied with weapons through very interesting origins. There are stories of U.S. soldiers smuggling weapons to certain gangs in Chicago. One of those gangs hailing from the South Side, the Pocket Town GDs, who were in the middle of a very violent war against a crew from the east side in an area known as Terror Town. NLMB, No Limit Muskegon Boys, with its most recognizable member being the rapper G Herbo. But this is just one of many stories of high-powered weapons meant for the battlefields of Afghanistan or Iraq making their way to the inner city community in the hands of young kids and teenagers waging war on one another. And death would once again come to take somebody close to KI. A 13-year-old boy by the name of Taekwon Tyler. It's said that him and KI was cousins, but he was more like a little brother to her. They were very close and they would spend a lot of time together, even though his mom moved him out of Chicago to a small town in Illinois to get away from all of the violence. But he would often come back to visit. He wanted to attend a house party that was being held on the 6200 block of South Rhodes Avenue. Initially, his mom didn't want him to go. She had a bad feeling about it, but he kept asking and begging about going to this party. He wanted to go with KI, and eventually his mom agreed that he could go under one condition, that she would be there to pick him up as soon as the party was over. But as the party was ending and people were beginning to leave, a fight broke out amongst a group of men and gunshots rang out. One of those bullets striking 13-year-old Taekwon Tyler in the chest. His mom was already there to pick him up from the party, but what she found was her son bleeding out on the sidewalk. She held him in her arms as he took his last breath, and KI was there to witness the whole thing, her little brother being murdered right in front of her. It's said that the fight that broke out at the party had nothing to do with Taekwon, and he was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. There is also a theory that KI had begun to train Taekwon on gunplay and how to rob, and she would send him to rob older drug dealers. And that's what happened. One of those dealers got mad, doubled back, and killed a young Taekwon. A man named Nashawn Flowers would be arrested for his murder, and he would ultimately be convicted and sentenced to 55 years in prison. After Taekwon's death, KI was truly heartbroken, but she vowed to make the streets bleed in his name. She would change her social media handle to Taekwon Assassin, and she would create a subset of STL EBT. Taekwon World comprised of some of the youngest members of the gang, people like TB and Poppy, Richie Jerk, and 0078, who's probably most well known for allegedly killing one of the most feared shooters in Chicago gangland history, 051 Melly. Taekwon World would quickly grow a reputation for dropping bodies. KI would instruct her youngins to slide on certain neighborhoods that they were beefing with, while she would go at the bigger targets. 800, TYMB, 300 in Lamron, and especially O Block. Anybody could get it. It was a war going on, and in KI's mind, she was a soldier. But in war, there are casualties, and Tukaville would lose another member by the name of Marlon Monroe, aka Little Doc, because on April 28, 2012, the 23-year-old Little Doc was walking home from work on the 6300 block of South St. Lawrence Avenue when a gunman leaned out of a vehicle and sprayed up the block, striking Little Doc in the chest. The Chicago PD would arrive on scene to collect evidence. They collected shell casings and anything else that they could see. They collected everything except Little Doc. He laid there in the tall weeds, dead, for hours, until a 16-year-old boy stumbled upon his body and called the police again, and they finally came and got him. In the months that followed, Tukaville and O Block would relentlessly diss each other online, clowning each other's dead homies. And when it came to O Block, they liked to diss one STL EBT member in particular, one of KI's best friends, Shondell Gregory, aka Tuka.
Tuka, what I'm smoking on? Shondell, oh my bitch, give my to your brain. Oh block, right up on your block, bitch. Yo, go, come on, man down, bitch, you on. Daddy, rolling up that.
And on September 25th, 2012, a fight would take place on the train that would forever tie K.I. to one of her biggest rivals, Davon Bennett, aka King Von. They started to fight as soon as they seen each other on the train. King Von would punch K.I. in the face multiple times. Then he would take to Twitter to let everybody know what he did to her. K.I. would acknowledge what happened, but says she only has a bruise on her face, but it's all good because her 40 cal could leave a hole in King Von's face. And a few days later, K.I. would tweet directly at King Von to let him know that she had just beat up a member of O Block on the train. One of Von's friends, named Little Scud, King Von would acknowledge these tweets by saying that K.I. wasn't no lame and how he think he's in love with her. And K.I. would diss King Von in response, but that didn't faze him. He told K.I. that he wanted to wife her up and how he would treat her right. And on October 5th, 2012, King Von would begin to direct message K.I., telling her how much he liked her and how much he wanted to get with her. At first, K.I. would reject his advances, but Von would stay persistent, and eventually, she started to open up to him. She even asked him about a rumor that she heard that O Block wanted her dead and that she was a top priority. King Von would tell her, "Yeah, there are people in O Block that want you dead, but I don't think I could pull the trigger." He said that he liked her too much. He told her that he had a gun on him when she seen him on the train, and there was another time that they ran into each other and King Von was strapped, so if he really wanted to get to her, he could have done it those times. Von would also tell K.I. that after the gang wars were over, that they could be together. K.I. would ask King Von how long did he plan on gangbanging, in which King Von would respond by saying that he couldn't see himself doing anything else, that he loved his guys too much, and that he could never leave them behind. One thing that K.I. and King Von could agree on is that they both felt that they would die in the streets in the Chicago gang wars. But even though they would have moments of being cordial and somewhat respectful to one another, they were still enemies, and dissing would always come into play. Not too long after exchanging messages with Von, K.I. would tweet out about O.D. Perry disrespecting him, in which King Von would respond by saying, "I should have pissed or spit on you when I seen you on the train that day, but I wasn't thinking straight." K.I. would then message King Von making fun of O Block, saying that they weren't dropping any bodies and how it was Tukaville putting in all of the work. K.I. got Von so agitated that he flat out asked her, "What, you want to have a shootout with me or something?" K.I. would respond by saying, "Hell yeah, with you and T-Roy." T-Roy being James Johnson, an O Block legend. Despite his small stature, he was known for being feared in the streets and being quick with his gun. He was best friends with King Von, and together they formed a deadly duo known as V-Roy. K.I. would make good on her wish of wanting to have a shootout with him, because on October 9th, 2012, King Von and T-Roy would be spotted outside of the gates of O Block. It's said that K.I., along with FBG Cash, ran down on him, spraying up the block and shooting King Von in the leg, but they were able to survive this attack. King Von would take to social media, making light of being shot in the leg, and he would tell K.I. that he wasn't a lame and that he shouldn't have to get shot in order for them to be cool, making jokes about the situation. But his best friend T-Roy, he would take a more serious tone by simply tweeting out, "I'm gonna kill this bitch." But K.I. wasn't done applying pressure to O Block. She shot the female cousin of T-Roy, and she was arrested and questioned behind the incident. Even though she survived the attack and named K.I. as her shooter, no charges were ever brought against her. It's said that she also tried to murder her ex-boyfriend, Mikado 600, who was down with O Block. She seen him near Parkway Gardens and tried to run down on him, but he was able to escape. The name K.I. is said to be a shorter version of her name Jakira, but it's also believed that it stood for Killer Instinct, and she definitely had it. But now, it was O Block's time to slide. On October 13th, 2012, 3 young men were walking on the 6300 block of South Rhodes Avenue Richie Jerk, Modell McKembry, and his cousin, Miles Turner, were going to see a girl. Once they arrived at the house, Modell's cousin Miles went up on the porch to talk to the young lady. Modell and Richie started walking down the block when 3 men appeared from a gangway out of the darkness. Richie Jerk started running and he was able to escape, but Modell, he was hit 5 times. And his cousin Miles, who was on the porch, seeing what happened, he ran to his cousin and held him in his arms. But as he was on the ground trying to console his cousin, the 3 gunmen made the decision not to leave any witnesses, and he was shot multiple times in the back. And those 3 gunmen were King Von, T. Roy, and J Money from O Block. Modell McKembry was a known member of Tuckerville along with Richie Jerk, but Miles Turner had no gang affiliations. He was a high school football player at Leo High School, and he had dreams of playing college ball, but now he was paralyzed from the waist down, and his dreams were taken away after being shot by King Von. Modell McKembry was 17 at the time of his death, and King Von would disrespect him on social media on a regular basis. But O Block wasn't done putting in work on Tuckerville, because on the morning of October 30th, 2012, a 23-year-old man by the name of Derek Johnson, aka P5, was walking on the 6200 block of South Eberhard Avenue when he was approached by 3 men, Big A from O Block, J Money, and King Von. He was shot 6 times in the head and 9 times in the body. And although he hailed from Gyro City, he had strong ties to Tuckerville. The day before P5's death, King Von would tweet out about how he needed to catch another body so he could finally catch up with his best friend T. Roy. But O Block wasn't done applying pressure to STL EBT, because on the morning of November 8th, 2012, 17-year-old Boss Trail would be found face down in an alley on the 2600 block of West 83rd Street. It said that he was out that way, far away from Tuckerville, to meet a girlfriend, but when he arrived, he was met by 3 gunmen instead, J Money, T. Roy, and King Von. They had all conspired to set him up. He got double-crossed by an ex-girlfriend. Boss Trail was a high-profile member of Tuckerville, and he was a high priority for O Block to want to take out. He allegedly killed 2 of their most beloved members. On September 13th, 2011, 18-year-old Devon Varner, aka D-Thang, the co-creator of 600, would be chased down and shot to death, allegedly by FBG Wooski, Dome from Gyro City, and Boss Trail. It said that he was also responsible for the death of 19-year-old Sharoy Liggins on February 16, 2012. Sharoy was leaving a store near O Block, but when he was walking out, Boss Trail was across the street and he had a gun with a red beam. He shot Sharoy in the head from a distance, but he wouldn't die right away. He would be left in the hospital fighting for his life for the next 4 days, but eventually he would pass away. The members of Tuckerville would make fun of Sharoy online, and they would often reference the red beam that Boss Trail used to take his life, and that same gun could be seen in the FBG Duck and King Little J video Critical, with Boss Trail pointing a red beam directly at the camera. Similar to Sharoy, who was left fighting for his life in the hospital, is the same way that Boss Trail would be left in a hospital fighting for his, but after 7 days, he would pass on as well. It's said that Boss Trail had plans on getting out of the gang life, and he bought a bus ticket to move to a new city and start all over. He wrote on Twitter about how he was excited for his new life, but just 2 days before he was scheduled to depart, he would be shot and he would never make that trip. And O Block would take to social media to taunt STL EBT on losing Boss Trail, one of their most important members, and it really hit KI hard. She was close to Boss Trail and he had taught her a lot. Tuckerville would celebrate the memory of Boss Trail, and they would also vow to get revenge in his name. But despite the bloodshed between O-Block and Tucaville, King Von and K.I. stayed in touch. King Von would tweet out about them talking on the phone and how sexy K.I. sounded, or how disappointed he was when she didn't answer the phone. And according to Tay Capone, who used to go by the name of Tay 600 and was very close to King Von, he said that he seen the messages between the two and they were very interesting, to say the least.
After like weeks and weeks of him talking to her like that, on BDN, she started fake caving in to like, she thought like Von and her had some love, like a little fling or something after a while. Like, for you to show me the DMs, no cap. Like, for you to be right there, like, for look at this, but he'll be laughing like, I really got her.
According to K.I.'s friends, there was definitely something there between her and King Von. But her friends also say that K.I. believed that she wasn't really pretty enough for Von to want. In her eyes, she felt, what is there to like?
He was like, well, she too pretty for that, and tell her to stop gang banging, you know.
He liked her as a girlfriend?
Yeah, he wanted to be her boyfriend. She just felt like he was trying to set her up and kill her. That's what she told me. She like, I think he just trying to kill me. He don't like me. What's the like?
But King Von and K.I.'s somewhat romantic and very deadly relationship would be put on hold because on November 20th, 2012, King Von would be arrested for unlawful use of a firearm by a convicted felon. He would spend the next year and a half behind bars. But even while locked up, King Von had K.I. on his mind. He would have his sister, Kayla B., reach out to her and tell her that Von missed her. And he wanted her to come see him while he was in jail. But K.I., she would just laugh off the messages. She was too busy becoming one of the most infamous shooters in Chicago. And it said that she began to do murders for hire. There was a message thread that was released from K.I.'s DMs between her and an unknown man talking about the possibility of taking out a high-profile Chicago rapper. And as they were trying to work out the details of the transaction, the conversation is abruptly ended with K.I. simply saying, 10K for Little Herb up front. Lil Herb meaning G Herbo, getting fast money, living a fast life. But she still wanted revenge for so many of her friends who had recently fallen. Modell, P5, and her mentor, Boss Trail. K.I. wanted get back on O-Block. And on September 2nd, 2013, she would get that opportunity at revenge because 21-year-old Jerome Woods, aka J Money, who was best friends with King Von and T-Roy, and known to go on multiple hits with him, including the murder of Boss Trail. And J Money would be set up in a very similar way as Boss Trail. When he arrived to the 6600 block of South Rhodes Avenue, he thought he was going to meet a young lady, but he was met by two gunmen, with one of those gunmen being Rasan Shaw, aka Lil B, No Surrender, one of the top shooters out of STL EBT. When J Money realized that he was being set up, he tried to run through a gangway, but he was shot multiple times in his back. He collapsed on the ground, and the other gunman walked up to him as he laid there and stood over him and put 4 more shots into his head. Immediately following the death of J Money, Little B would tweet out about it, and K.I. as well. She tweeted about shooting people in the head at point blank range. Then she would just flat out say, J Money ain't use his head, so we took it off. Tucaville had just upped the score, and STL EBT celebrated the death of J Money. They knew how much he meant to O-Block. In the morning of February 11th, 2014, King Von would be released from jail, and one of the first things that he did was tweet at K.I. saying, what's up, ma? You don't miss a nigga? K.I. would respond with gun emojis, asking to link up. King Von would laugh off the guns and ask her why she never came to see him, like she promised that she would. K.I. didn't respond for hours, and when she did, she said, how does it feel to lose your homie while you locked up behind them bars during that time? King Von didn't respond to this comment. He would simply tweet out, R.I.P. J Money. K.I. would retweet this as well, making fun of King Von. But Def would once again pay K.I. a visit, taking someone very close to her, Little B, No Surrender. They knew each other ever since they were babies. They grew up together. Then they started to do drills together. But it wouldn't be the ops that would get the Little B, it would be the Chicago PD.
A massive police presence between Eberhard and Rhodes on 63rd. Patrol cars, blue lights flashing after a police-involved shooting.
He got shot 7 times on Rhodes, right there by the police.
Friends say 19-year-old Rasan Shah had just left them to get something to eat.
He was running through the alley with no gun or nothing, because he just left us, so we know he ain't had no gun. The police shot him unjustified. Too many times in his back. He ain't do nothing, man.
The death of Little B destroyed K.I.'s spirit. She completely broke down at the funeral, and now that K.I. was in pain, she wanted her enemies to be in pain too, especially Chief Keef, who had been dissing Tuka for many years, but he had long ago left Chicago for sunny Los Angeles and rap stardom, but he still had family ties in the city, and K.I. would take full advantage of this, because in the early morning hours of April 10th, 2014, 30-year-old Mario Hess, aka Blood Money, and a cousin of Chief Keef, was sitting in front of his family's home in West Inglewood when he was approached by a gunman and shot multiple times. Just 2 weeks prior to his death, he signed a deal with Interscope Records, and he did interviews talking about how he had big plans for the future. But unfortunately, those plans would never come to fruition. K.I. would let it be known that she was responsible for the death of Blood Money, but not even the death of her enemies could heal her heart. She would take to social media to talk about her pain and everything that she had been through in her life and all of the friends that she had lost. She even made a post about her dad and how she knew that she would be a better person if he was around. According to K.I.'s mom, she tried to talk to her daughter about everything that was going on, but when she looked her daughter in the eyes, she could already tell that her soul was gone, and her mother's intuition would be proven correct, because on April 11th, 2014, K.I. would make a fatal mistake. She would tweet out her location for everybody to see, including her enemies. She was walking on the 6400 block of South Eberhard. She was with FBG Butter and Spoon from Gyro City. They were headed over to Wooski's house to celebrate Boss Trail's birthday, when a gunman hopped out of a vehicle, waved a few bystanders who was in his path out of the way so he could have a clear shot, and began to fire at K.I. and her friends. Her 2 friends would be hit, one in the foot, one in the knee, and K.I., she was hit 9 times, in the chest, neck, and in the jaw. After being shot, she would stumble to a nearby home where she laid on some steps, and she would take her last breath, ending the life of the most deadly female assassin in Chicago gangland history.
Always apart, always acting wild when you should be doing what you told. You was never one of us. You never could be. How my hair look, Mike?
You look good, girl.
Following the news of her death, K.I.'s enemies would take to social media and rejoice and celebrate her demise. In Tukaville, they would vow to get revenge. Right after K.I.'s murder, 36 people would be shot in a 36-hour period, along with 4 people losing their lives. There were 2 prime suspects in the murder of K.I., with one of them being Antron Young, aka Big A from O Block. He would take to the internet and let it be known about his involvement in K.I.'s death. And he would change his social media handle from Big A to Big Aski, meaning Ask K.I. But in the early morning hours of December 4th, 2016, Big A entered a Sammy's Grill on South King Drive. But while inside, an altercation occurred that resulted in him being shot in the face. dead at only 23 years old. Some people say that this had nothing to do with K.I.'s death and it was a completely separate situation. But there's also a theory that it was two members from Tuckerville, DeAndre Wallace, aka Can't Get Right, and George Barnes, aka G.I. Joe, K.I.'s brother. Some believe that he was the one that got get back for his slain sister. And the second prime suspect in K.I.'s murder was none other than King Von. On April 24th, 2014, he will be arrested and held for questioning, but ultimately, the state would reject the case due to lack of evidence, and King Von would walk free. But just a few weeks later, King Von would be arrested again for a different murder, that of 19-year-old Malcolm Stuckey, who was killed after attending a party in the Inglewood neighborhood. King Von would spend the next 3 years in prison fighting this case, but in 2017, after a 5-day trial, he would be found innocent and once again set free. But once he was released, he went right back to doing what he did best, drilling. There's a famous Instagram live with King Von and members of O Block going back and forth with members of Tuckerville, with King Von saying that they had a surprise coming for him and that it was coming soon. On October 22nd, 2018, there was a funeral being held at Burnside Church for a 25-year-old man by the name of Vantrease Chris, aka Dusky the Man. There were members of Tuckerville in attendance, but as the service was being let out, a car pulled up and started shooting into the crowd, hitting 6 people, including FBG Wooski with an almost fatal shot to the head.
Back to the shooting that happened on 92nd and Cottage Grove. At least 6 people were shot as they were leaving Bethlehem Star Missionary Baptist Church. Friends and families gathered for the funeral service of Chicago rapper Vantrease Chris, who went by the name Dusky the Man. Chris was shot on October 9th. He was taken to the hospital where he later died. The victims in yesterday's shooting range from 18 to 27 years old, males and a female. The most critical, a 21-year-old shot in the head.
King Von would let it be known that him and the Get Back gang were responsible for the brazen act. But King Von wouldn't have to be in the streets for too much longer, because legendary Chicago rapper Lil Durk would take him under his wing and begin to groom him to become a rap superstar. And he would release a string of hits, quickly becoming one of the hottest rappers in the game. But even during his time at the top, he would still talk about K.I., dissing her in songs and on social media, along with other murders that he claimed that he committed, doing math, counting up the bodies.
Talk about bodies, I got a few, 4 + 3, 3 + 2, I'm King Von.
Need no bean to make you bleed, nigga. Body count so ugly, I remind you of that scream, nigga. Bleed.
Can't stand him. What? Body count so ugly, still handsome. Don't pop my chain, but dance. Let's talk bodies, I got 7. They stop me at the airport cause I keep that metal.
And the story of King Von and K.I. would get even more interesting in 2019 when the TV network A&E filmed a documentary titled Secret Life of a Gang Girl, The Untold Story. And during this documentary, they interviewed King Von. But from the tone of the interview, it seems as if A&E was under the impression that King Von was a man in love with K.I., obsessed with being with her, not knowing that they may have been interviewing a man obsessed with taking her life.
I was trying to us. I was like, damn, we doing shit.
The exact text was something along the lines of, when it's all over with, I'm gonna get up in you or something. Does that sound about right?
That sound raw, so yeah, I'll be saying raw. Yeah, I probably did say that.
But King Von's ride at the top wouldn't last for too much longer. He had tension with superstar Louisiana rapper NBA Youngboy, who had beef with Lil Durk and OTF.
Fuck Youngboy talking about on this song, bro.
What?
He talking crazy on this one.
Oh yeah?
He ain't even like that.
Oh!
On his ass now.
On his
All
ass.
that cap. You got cap in your raps.
Bro, street boss, don't hit the white lady.
You got cap in your raps.
But in the early morning hours of November 6, 2020, that tension would escalate into a fight outside of a hookah lounge in Atlanta between King Von and Georgia rapper Quando Rondo, who was signed to NBA Youngboy. And this fight would result in King Von being shot multiple times, ending the life of the O Block legend. 1 year after his death, the Chicago PD began to release documents listing King Von as the murderer in multiple cases, including that of Jakira Barnes, officially ending the chapter of King Von versus K.I. In the years following the death of her daughter, K.I.'s mom has gotten together with other mothers in Chicago who have lost their children to violence. FBG Duck's mom, Tuka's mom, amongst others, trying to bring some peace and light to such a tragic and dark situation. There's a stigma that black kids in poor communities choose the gang life simply because they're more prone to violence. They want easy money, street credibility, and internet clout. And for some, that very well may be true. But there's also a number of young kids that choose the gang life to receive something they feel they never had before: love and family. Even if that love is coming from a cold street and that family is giving you a hug while handing you a gun to put in work. And if K.I. was raised in a different environment under different circumstances, maybe her life would have turned out different for the better, but we'll never know. And Jakira Barnes, she was only 17 years old when she died. Rest in peace.